My daughter drugged me and shaved my head right before her wedding simply because she didn't want my old, worn-out face overshadowing her father-in-law on her big day. Did she think I would hide away in shame and humiliation? She was wrong. I didn't wear a wig and I didn't run away. I was preparing the most devastating exposure gift in front of all 500 guests. And when the truth was revealed, she would realize that she had just destroyed her own life with her own hands. I'm so grateful you're here with me today. Let me know in the comments, what brought you to this story? Did a friend share it, or did you discover it through search? I genuinely want to connect with each of you. Please note this account features creative storytelling elements crafted for educational and entertainment value. Resemblances to specific individuals or locations are coincidental, yet the core message offers practical wisdom you can apply. Something felt wrong the moment I opened my eyes. The morning light filtered through the curtains of my bedroom, the same Victorian room where I had slept for 20 years, but my head felt impossibly light, as if a weight I had carried my entire adult life had been lifted while I slept. I pressed my palm against my scalp, expecting the familiar thickness of silver hair that I had always taken pride in. Instead, my fingers met stubble, rough, uneven patches of skin. My heart began to race. I sat up too quickly and the room tilted. A dull ache throbbed at the base of my skull, the kind that comes after a deep, unnatural sleep. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood gripping the nightstand for balance. My mouth was dry, my tongue thick. I tried to remember the night before, but the memories were hazy, fragmented. Penelope had brought me tea. Herbal tea, she said, to help me sleep before the big day. The big day, my daughter's wedding. I stumbled toward the bathroom, my legs unsteady beneath me. The hardwood floor felt cold under my bare feet. I flipped the light switch, and the fluorescent bulbs buzzed to life, harsh and unforgiving. I lifted my gaze to the mirror. The face staring back at me was mine, but not mine. My head was completely bare. Not a single strand of hair remained. The scalp was pale exposed, covered in angry red marks and shallow scratches. Small scabs dotted the crown where the razor had pressed too hard. I looked like a stranger, like someone who had been stripped of their dignity in the night. I raised a trembling hand to touch the top of my head again, as if my reflection might be lying. The skin was tender, raw in places. I traced the lines of old scars I had never known existed, hidden all these years beneath hair I had never thought to lose. My breathing came shallow and fast. This could not be real. This could not be happening. But it was. I gripped the edge of the sink, my knuckles turning white. The room seemed to close in around me. My vision blurred. I blinked hard, trying to focus, trying to think. Who would do this? Why would anyone do this? And then a worse thought crept in, cold and suffocating. Penelope had been in my room last night. She had handed me that tea with a smile I had not seen in years. She had kissed my forehead and told me to rest well. No. No, she would not. She could not. I forced myself to breathe. I needed to see the rest. I needed to know how far this went. I turned away from the mirror and walked back into the bedroom. My eyes went immediately to the armchair in the corner where I had carefully laid out my tuxedo the night before. The custom suit I had spent $15,000 on tailored perfectly to fit, chosen for this one day. The day I would walk my only daughter down the aisle. The chair was still there, but the tuxedo was not. I crossed the room in 3 strides and found it on the floor beside the chair, crumpled in a heap. I bent down and picked up the jacket. The fabric had been slashed. Long, deliberate cuts ran through the shoulders and down the back. The satin lining hung in ribbons. I dropped it and grabbed the shirt. The buttons were torn off. The collar was shredded. The trousers were worse. Someone had taken scissors or a knife and hacked through the legs, leaving jagged edges and ruined seams. My breath caught in my throat. I stood there holding the pieces of my destroyed suit, unable to process what I was seeing. This was not an accident. This was not carelessness. This was intentional. This was cruel. I dropped the trousers and turned toward the wastebasket near my desk. Something silver caught the light. I walked over and looked down. Hair, my hair. Thick clumps of it still holding their shape, filling the bin almost to the top. I reached in and pulled out a handful. The strands were long, the color I had been proud of for decades. The same silver that people always said made me look distinguished. The same hair Catherine used to run her fingers through when we sat together in the evenings. Gone, all of it. Thrown away like trash. I sank to my knees beside the desk, the hair still clutched in my fist. My chest felt tight. My throat burned. I could not cry. I could not scream. I could only kneel there, staring at the evidence of my daughter's betrayal, trying to make sense of the impossible. Penelope had done this. My own daughter. The little girl I had raised alone after her mother died. The girl I had worked 3 jobs for, sacrificed everything for, built a company for. She had drugged me, shaved my head while I slept, destroyed the one suit I had bought to honor her wedding day. But why? The question echoed in my mind louder than my heartbeat. Why would she do this? What could I have possibly done to deserve this? And then, like a flash of lightning, I remembered something she had said weeks ago. Something I had dismissed as a joke. She had been talking to Bradford, her fiancé, in the hallway, and I had overheard her laugh. A cold, brittle sound. She had said something about making sure I did not overshadow anyone, that I needed to know my place. I had thought she was talking about someone else. My phone rang. The sound cut through the silence like a blade. I looked up disoriented and saw it vibrating on the nightstand. I stood slowly, my legs weak, and walked over. The screen showed a name I trusted more than almost anyone. Gerald Foster. I answered, my voice hoarse. Gerald. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it I had never heard before. Sir, I am on my way to you now. We need to talk about what happened last night. I swallowed hard. What do you mean? What do you know? There was a pause. Then quietly he said, just stay where you are. Do not leave the house. Do not let anyone in. I will explain everything when I arrive. The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, staring at the ruined tuxedo on the floor, the hair in the wastebasket, the stranger's face in the mirror. Gerald knew something. Something big enough to make him drive over here at 7 in the morning on my daughter's wedding day. Whatever it was, I had a terrible feeling that this was only the beginning. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the clumps of silver hair scattered across the floor. My hands were still shaking. How did my daughter become someone capable of this? 25 years ago, I married Catherine. She was 29 with dark eyes that saw through every wall I tried to build. I was 31 working in a small tech startup that barely paid the bills, but she never cared about money. We had 2 children. Penelope was 8, curious and bright. Benjamin was 5, quieter, content to sit beside me while I worked late into the night. We were not wealthy, but we were happy. Catherine used to make Sunday dinners, where everyone had to be at the table. Penelope would help her in the kitchen, standing on a stool to stir the sauce, laughing when flour dusted her nose. Benjamin would set the table with uneven forks and crooked napkins. I would sit at the head of that table and think that I had everything a man could ever need. That life ended 20 years ago. Catherine got sick in the winter of 2003. First fatigue, then weight loss, then pain she could not explain. By the time the doctors found the cancer, it had spread too far. They gave her 6 months. She lasted 9, fighting every day for the children. I remember the last night in the hospital. Catherine lay in the bed, her body frail, her breathing shallow. Penelope and Benjamin had gone home with my sister. It was just us. She reached for my hand, her fingers cold and thin. Promise me you will take care of our babies. I nodded, unable to speak. She squeezed my hand. Make sure they know they are loved. Make sure they grow up strong. I bent down and kissed her forehead. I promise, Catherine. I swear to you, I will. She smiled, faint and tired. I know you will. You are a good man, Roland. Those were the last words she ever said to me. She passed away 3 hours later while I sat beside her holding her hand. The funeral was held on a cold, gray morning. Rain fell in heavy sheets. We stood together at the graveside, the three of us. Benjamin clung to my leg, silent and trembling. Penelope stood a few feet away, staring at the casket with dry eyes, her face blank. I tried to reach for her, but she pulled away. A week later, I found Penelope in her room, sitting on the floor, her mother's scarf clutched in her hands. I sat down beside her. Before I could speak, she turned to me, her face twisted with anger. This is your fault. I blinked, stunned. What? Her voice rose, shaking. If you made more money, Mom could have had better doctors. She could have gone to the best hospitals. But you did not. You let her die because you are a failure. The words hit me like fists. She was 13 years old. She had just lost her mother. She did not mean it, but she did. From that day forward, something broke between us. I worked 3 jobs to keep the house, to keep the kids fed and clothed. I started a small tech company out of our garage writing code late into the night. I taught myself to cook by watching videos on the internet. I learned to braid hair by practicing on a doll from a thrift store, just so I could help Penelope get ready for school. Every night after the kids were asleep, I would sit in the living room with a photo of Catherine beside me. I would talk to her, tell her about my day, ask her what I should do. I would promise her again and again that I was keeping my word. The company grew slowly at first, then faster. By the time Penelope graduated high school, Bannerman Technologies was valued at $12 million. By the time she finished college, it was worth $60 million. I had built something that would take care of my children for the rest of their lives, but Penelope never saw it that way. She saw a father who worked too much, who embarrassed her with his humble beginnings, who did not fit into the world she wanted to belong to. She went to an elite university, met people with old money and aristocratic names, and she learned to be ashamed of me. Benjamin was different. He stayed close. He visited every Sunday just like his mother used to insist. He asked about the company, about my health, about the old stories. He became an architect, built a career on his own merit, and never once asked me for anything he had not earned. But Penelope drifted further away. She moved to the city, surrounded herself with people who judged success by the size of your estate and the age of your family name. She stopped calling, stopped visiting, until 6 months ago when she called to tell me she was engaged to Bradford Montgomery, a man from a family she believed was better than ours. I thought that was the moment we could reconnect. I thought she had finally forgiven me. I offered to pay for the wedding. I bought her a $5 million lakefront mansion as a gift. I told her I was proud of her, and last night she drugged me. She shaved my head while I slept. She destroyed the only suit I had bought to honor her wedding day. I stood up from the bed, my legs steadier now, my thoughts clearer. I walked over to the dresser and picked up the framed photograph of Catherine. Her smile looked back at me warm and kind, the same smile that had carried me through 20 years of doubt and exhaustion. I whispered, my voice breaking. I tried, Catherine. I kept my promise. I gave her everything, but it was not enough. It had never been enough. The resentment had started the day Catherine died. Penelope blamed me then, and she blamed me now. 20 years of distance. 20 years of silent anger. And now, on the day she was supposed to become someone else's responsibility, she had chosen to destroy me one last time. I set the photograph down and turned toward the door. Somewhere in this house, or in the events of last night, there was an answer, and Gerald was on his way to give it to me. 1 year ago, when Penelope called to tell me she was engaged, I cried. Not tears of joy, though I pretended they were. They were tears of relief. For 15 years, I had watched my daughter drift further away, building a life that had no room for me. Every holiday she missed, every call she ignored, Every time she looked at me with pity and embarrassment, it carved another piece out of my heart. I told myself it was temporary, that one day she would come back. When she said she was marrying Bradford Montgomery, I thought that day had finally come. She invited me to dinner at a restaurant I could not pronounce in a part of the city where the waiters wore gloves and the menus had no prices. Bradford was already seated, his posture painfully straight. He stood to shake my hand, his grip firm but brief, as if touching something he would rather not. "Mr. Bannerman," he said, his voice smooth and practiced. "Penelope has told me so much about you." I doubted that, but I smiled and sat down, determined to make this work. The dinner was painfully polite. Bradford talked about his family's history, their investments, their estate in Connecticut that had been in the family for 4 generations. He asked about my company, but the way he said it made it sound small, quaint. Something a man does when he has no better options. Penelope said nothing. She just watched me, waiting to see if I would embarrass her. I did not. I smiled, I congratulated them, and I offered to pay for the wedding. Bradford waved the offer away as if it were an insult, but Penelope's eyes lit up. "Thank you, Daddy," she said, and for a moment I believed her. The months that followed were strange. Penelope started calling me every week. Not quick, obligatory calls, but long conversations where she asked about my day, the company, my health. She came to my office with lunch, sat across from my desk, and smiled at me the way she used to when she was a little girl. One afternoon, about 8 months before the wedding, she showed up unannounced, holding sandwiches from a deli I had mentioned once. She sat down, folding her hands in her lap. "Dad," she said quietly, "I need to tell you something." I looked up, concerned. "What is it?" She took a breath, and her eyes filled with tears. "I am sorry. For everything. For blaming you when Mom died. For pulling away. For making you feel like you were not enough." Her voice cracked. "You were always enough. I was just too angry to see it." I walked around the desk and pulled her into my arms. She cried against my shoulder, and I held her the way I used to when she was small and afraid of thunderstorms. "I forgive you," I whispered. "I have always forgiven you." When she pulled back, she smiled at me. "I want you at my wedding, Dad. Not just there, but part of it. I want you to walk me down the aisle. I want you to give a speech. I want everyone to see how proud I am to be your daughter." I believed her. God help me, I believed every word. Benjamin was not so easily convinced. A few weeks later, he came by and found me looking at tuxedo catalogs. He sat down beside me, his expression wary. "Dad, what is going on with Penelope? She has barely spoken to you in 10 years, and now she is calling you every day, bringing you lunch, crying on your shoulder." He shook his head. "It does not feel right." I closed the catalog. "People change, Ben. Maybe she has finally healed." He leaned forward. "Or maybe she wants something." I wanted to argue, but a part of me wondered if he was right. Still, I could not bring myself to believe my daughter was capable of that level of manipulation. "I have to believe she means it," I said finally. Benjamin sighed. "Just be careful, Dad, please." I promised I would be, but I was not. 8 months before the wedding, I met Susan Miller at a charity event. She was 54, a retired teacher with kind eyes and a laugh that reminded me of Catherine. We started talking, and by the end of the night, I had her number. By the end of the month, we were seeing each other regularly. Susan was everything I had forgotten I needed. She did not care about my money or my company. She cared about books and gardening and whether I had eaten lunch. She made me feel like a person again. I told Penelope about her 6 months before the wedding. I thought she would be happy for me. Instead, her face went cold. "You are not bringing her to the wedding." I blinked. "What?" "Susan," Penelope said sharply. "She is not coming. This is a high society event, Dad. She would not fit in. She would embarrass us." The words stung. She is important to me, Penelope, and this wedding is important to me. She crossed her arms. If you care about me at all, you will leave her at home. I should have refused, but I did not. I told Susan there was a mistake with the guest list. She smiled and said she understood, but I saw the hurt in her eyes. I ordered a custom tuxedo, $15,000, tailored perfectly. I had the deed to a $5.2 million lakefront estate drawn up the same house Catherine and I used to walk past when we were young and broke. I planned to give it to Penelope at the reception, so she would know how much I loved her. Benjamin came by the night I finalized the paperwork. He looked at the deed on my desk and shook his head. Dad, this is too much. Are you sure about this? I smiled. She came back to me, Ben. After all these years, she finally came back. He did not look convinced, but he hugged me and told me he loved me. I did not know that while I was planning the most generous gift of my life, Penelope was planning the cruelest betrayal. I did not know that the daughter I had sacrificed everything for had been setting a trap all along. All I knew was that I wanted to make her happy, and I would have given her anything to do it. 3 months before the wedding, my son Benjamin walked into my office holding a stack of papers. His face was pale, his jaw tight. He closed the door and set the papers on my desk without a word. I looked up from my computer, concerned. Ben, what is wrong? He pointed at the documents. Dad, these are not estate planning papers. These are corporate transfer agreements. I frowned and reached for the stack. The top page had my signature at the bottom, dated 2 months earlier. I scanned the text, catching phrases I did not fully understand. Transfer of voting rights. Irrevocable power of attorney. Effective immediately upon execution. Penelope told me this was for tax purposes, I said slowly. She said it would protect the company if something happened to me. Benjamin sat down, leaning forward. Dad, look at page 4, section 7. I flipped through the pages until I found it. The language was dense, full of legal terms I had not bothered to read carefully when Penelope handed them to me over dinner 6 weeks ago. But now I forced myself to focus. Transfer of 40% voting shares to Penelope Bannerman. Grant of full power of attorney in the event of incapacitation, mental or physical. Effective the day after the wedding ceremony. My hands began to shake. What does this mean? Benjamin's voice was steady, but I could hear the anger beneath it. It means that if someone declares you mentally incompetent, Penelope gets control of nearly half the company. And with power of attorney, she can make decisions on your behalf. She can lock you out of your own business, Dad. I set the papers down and leaned back. My mind raced, trying to find an explanation that made sense. There has to be a reason. Maybe her lawyer suggested this for legal protection. Maybe Bradford's family requires certain structures for the marriage. Dad. Benjamin's voice was sharper now. This is a takeover. She is setting you up. I shook my head. No. Penelope would not do that. She came back to me. She apologized. She has been calling me every week, spending time with me. She loves me. Benjamin stood up, his frustration visible. Or she has been manipulating you. Did you read these documents before you signed them? I had not. Penelope had brought them to dinner at a restaurant, handed me a pen, and smiled while I scribbled my name across the bottom. She had kissed my cheek and told me how grateful she was. I had been so happy, so relieved to have her back, that I had not questioned a single word. I trusted her, I said quietly. Benjamin picked up the papers and held them in front of me. Then you need to cancel this. Call your attorney. Stop this before it is too late. But I could not. The thought of confronting Penelope, of accusing her of something so terrible, felt impossible. She was my daughter. She had apologized. She had cried in my arms. I will talk to her after the wedding, I said. I do not want to ruin her day. Benjamin stared at me for a long moment, his expression somewhere between disbelief and despair. Then he shook his head, set the papers back on my desk, and walked out without another word. I sat alone in my office, the documents in front of me, and tried to convince myself that Benjamin was wrong, that Penelope had a reasonable explanation, that I was not a fool. It was only later, after everything had fallen apart, that I learned what had really happened. Gerald had found the emails during his investigation, buried in Bradford's account, sent between him and his father and Penelope. I read them in the days after the wedding, sitting in Howard's office, my hands trembling, as the truth unfolded in cold, clinical text. The first email was from Caldwell Montgomery to his son, dated 8 months before the wedding. The subject line read, "Opportunity." Caldwell had written that the family was in serious financial trouble. Their investments had collapsed. Their estate was underwater. They owed $8.2 million to creditors, and foreclosure was imminent. But he had a plan. Bradford would marry into money, specifically my money, and with the right legal strategy, they could take control of Bannerman Technologies before I even realized what was happening. The second email was from Penelope to Bradford, sent 3 weeks later. I still remember the words. "He is so pathetic. He actually cried when I told him I forgave him. The old fool trusts me completely now. I can get him to sign anything." There were more. Dozens of them. Penelope and Bradford discussing how to manipulate me, how to isolate me from anyone who might warn me how to file for a competency hearing the week after the wedding. They would claim I was suffering from early dementia. They would use my age, my isolation, my relationship with Susan as evidence of poor judgment. And once the court declared me incompetent, Penelope would have full control. Another email from Penelope made my stomach turn. "Once the incompetency filing goes through, we will own everything. The company, the assets, the house, and the old man will be too confused to fight back." I read those emails in Howard's office, my vision blurring, my chest tight. I had given her everything. I had raised her alone. I had built a company for her future, and she had spent months planning to destroy me. But sitting in my office that day, 3 months before the wedding, I did not know any of that yet. I only knew that my son had warned me, and I had refused to listen. I looked at the photograph of Catherine on my desk, her smile frozen in time, and I made the worst decision of my life. I would not confront Penelope. I would not cancel the documents. I would not ruin her wedding day. I would wait until after the ceremony, sit her down, and ask her to explain. I told myself I was being kind. I told myself I was protecting her happiness. I was wrong. What I did not know was that my decision to wait, to stay silent, to trust my daughter one more time, would lead to the moment I woke up bald and destroyed on the morning of her wedding. Howard Bennett had been my best friend for 35 years. We met when we were both starting out, 2 young men trying to build something from nothing. He became a lawyer. I became an entrepreneur. Through every success and failure, every marriage and loss, we had been there for each other. If anyone could see through a con, it was Howard. And he had started investigating the moment Benjamin told him about the documents. 2 months before the wedding, my phone rang while I was sitting in my office staring at the corporate transfer papers. It was Howard. "The Roland," he said without preamble. "Ben called me. He told me what he found." I sighed. "Howard, I appreciate your concern, but Penelope has an explanation. I am sure of it." There was a pause. Then Howard said carefully, "Let me run a background check on the Montgomery family. Just financials, nothing intrusive. If everything is clean, I will drop it. But if something is wrong, you need to know." I wanted to refuse, but a small voice in the back of my mind told me to let him look. "Fine," I said quietly. "But keep it discreet." Howard hired a private investigator named Marcus Webb, a former federal agent who specialized in corporate fraud. It took Marcus less than a week to find what we should have seen from the beginning. The Montgomery family was bankrupt, not struggling, bankrupt. They owed $8.2 million to creditors across 3 states. Their estate, the one Bradford had bragged about during our first dinner, was in foreclosure. The Securities and Exchange Commission was investigating Caldwell Montgomery for running a Ponzi scheme through his investment firm. The family had been bleeding money for years, and they were desperate. Howard came to my house with a folder full of documents. He set it on my kitchen table and opened it without a word. I read through page after page of financial records, court filings, and liens. My hands shook as the reality settled in. "They are using Penelope to get to you," Howard said. "This is not about love. This is not about family. This is about money." I closed the folder and looked at him. "What do I do?" "You cancel the wedding. You revoke those transfer documents. And you cut contact." I shook my head. "I cannot do that to her. Not without talking to her first." Howard leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. "Roland, this is not a misunderstanding. This is a coordinated attack. You need to protect yourself." But I could not bring myself to believe it. Not yet. 3 weeks before the wedding, Howard called again. This time his voice was different. Sharper. Angrier. "Roland, you need to come to my office now." I drove over immediately. When I walked in, Howard handed me a legal document. The header read, "Petition for Guardianship and Conservatorship." I scanned the pages, my stomach sinking with every line. Bradford's attorney had filed a petition with the probate court, requesting that Penelope be named as my legal guardian on the grounds that I was suffering from cognitive decline and was no longer capable of managing my own affairs. The hearing was scheduled for 1 week after the wedding. I looked up at Howard, my voice hoarse. "They are going to claim I am insane. Not they are going to claim you are incompetent," Howard said. "And if they succeed, Penelope gets full control. Your company, your assets, your freedom. Everything." I sat down heavily. "How did you find this?" "Cheryl Marcus has been monitoring court filings. This was submitted 2 days ago." I felt sick. This was not just greed. This was calculated. This was a plan to destroy me. Howard sat down beside me. "We are changing your will tomorrow. Everything goes to Benjamin and Charity. Penelope gets nothing. If she is going to betray you, she does not get to profit from it." I nodded, unable to speak. 2 weeks before the wedding, Gerald came to me with a suggestion. He had been watching the tension build, had seen the way Penelope circled around me at family gatherings, and he was worried. "Sir, I would like to install a security camera in your closet," he said. "Just to protect the tuxedo. $15,000 is a significant investment, and I do not trust the household staff during the wedding preparations." I frowned. "A camera in my bedroom." "Just the closet," Gerald assured me. "A small, discreet unit. You will not even notice it." I did not like the idea. It felt invasive, paranoid. But Gerald had been with me for 20 years, and I trusted his judgment more than I trusted my own at that point. "Fine," I said, "but only in the closet." Gerald installed the camera the next day. It was no larger than a button hidden in the corner of the closet ceiling, aimed at the rack where my tuxedo hung. That camera would save everything. 2 nights before the wedding, we held the rehearsal dinner at Bellini, an upscale Italian restaurant Penelope had chosen. The room was filled with her friends, Bradford's family, and a handful of people from my company. I sat at the head table, feeling out of place. Caldwell Montgomery sat across from me, his posture as stiff as his son's, his expression smug. After dinner, he leaned over and said just loud enough for me to hear, "You have done well for yourself, Roland. Self-made men always have a certain grit, but there is a difference between building wealth and being born into it. Bradford comes from a family with history, with class." I said nothing. I just nodded and took another sip of water. Across the table, Penelope was watching me. Her eyes flicked to my hair, then to Caldwell, then back to me. Caldwell leaned toward her and whispered something I could not hear. She looked at my hair again, longer this time, and nodded slowly. I should have left in that moment. I should have walked out, canceled everything, and never looked back. But I did not. 24 hours later, Penelope brought me a cup of tea. She smiled, kissed my forehead, and told me to rest well. I drank it, trusting her completely. And when I woke up the next morning, everything I thought I knew about my daughter ended along with my consciousness the night before. The tea tasted like chamomile with honey. Penelope had made it herself, carrying it into my bedroom on a small tray, with a smile that reminded me of the little girl she used to be. It was 9 in the evening the night before her wedding. I was sitting up in bed, going over notes for the speech I planned to give at the reception. When she knocked and entered, I set the papers aside and smiled. "I thought you might want something to help you sleep," she said, setting the tray on my nightstand. "Big day tomorrow." I picked up the cup, warm in my hands. "Thank you, sweetheart. That is very thoughtful." She sat on the edge of the bed, folding her hands in her lap. "I wanted to tell you how much it means to me that you are walking me down the aisle. I know I have not always been the daughter you deserved, but tomorrow I want everyone to see how proud I am to be your daughter." Her words hit me square in the chest. I reached over and squeezed her hand. "You have always been everything I could have hoped for, Penelope. Your mother would be so proud of you." She smiled, and for a moment I saw tears in her eyes. "This was Mom's recipe, you know. Chamomile and honey. She used to make it for me when I could not sleep." I took a sip, the warmth spreading through me. It tasted exactly the way I remembered Catherine making it. "It is perfect." Penelope kissed my forehead and stood. "Get some rest, Dad. I will see you in the morning." She left, closing the door softly behind her. I finished the tea, set the cup down, and leaned back against the pillows. Within 10 minutes, exhaustion hit me like a wall. My eyelids grew heavy. My limbs felt like lead. I barely managed to turn off the lamp before I sank into a darkness deeper than any sleep I had ever known. I do not remember anything after that. The sedative Penelope had mixed into the tea was hospital grade, the kind used before major surgeries. I was unconscious for 6 hours. It was only days later, when I finally watched the footage with Gerald, that I saw everything. The camera Gerald had installed in my closet had a night vision function. The timestamp in the corner of the screen read 1:30 in the morning when my bedroom door opened. Penelope and Bradford stepped inside carrying a black duffel bag. They moved quietly, but not carefully. They knew I would not wake up. Penelope walked to the closet first and pulled out my tuxedo. She held it up, examining it under the dim light from the hallway. Then she handed it to Bradford, who pulled out scissors from the bag. He cut through the jacket, first long, jagged slashes across the shoulders and down the back. Penelope laughed a low, cold sound that made my stomach turn when I watched it later. Bradford moved on to the shirt, tearing off the buttons, shredding the collar. The trousers were next hacked into uneven pieces and tossed onto the floor. When they were done, Penelope pulled out her phone and placed a call on speaker, setting it on the dresser. Caldwell Montgomery's voice filled the room. "Is everything ready? We just finished the suit," Bradford said. "Now for the main event." Caldwell's tone was calm, almost businesslike. "Make it look amateurish. Uneven patches, scratches. We need visible evidence of distress. This has to look like something an unstable person would do to themselves." Penelope walked over to the bed and looked down at me. I was lying on my back, completely still, my breathing slow and steady. She reached out and ran her fingers through my hair the same way she used to when she was a child and wanted comfort. Then she nodded to Bradford. He pulled an electric razor and a disposable razor from the bag. They started with the electric one, running it roughly over my scalp, tugging at the hair, jerking my head to the side. I did not move. I did not flinch. I was gone. When the electric razor had done most of the work, Bradford switched to the disposable, scraping it across my scalp in careless strokes. The blade caught on patches of stubble dragging across the skin. Red marks appeared where the razor had pressed too hard. My scalp looked raw, irritated, uneven. Bradford stepped back and took photos with his phone from different angles, close-ups of the scratches, wide shots of me lying in bed with my head shaved and my destroyed tuxedo on the floor beside me. "Perfect," Caldwell said through the speaker. "Those pictures will be key evidence in the competency hearing. Erratic behavior, self-harm, combined with the financial documents and the testimony we have lined up, the judge will have no choice." Penelope stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, staring down at me. "He looks pathetic now. Exactly what we need." Her voice was flat, emotionless, as if she were talking about a stranger. Bradford laughed. "I still cannot believe he actually signed those transfer documents. Did he even read them?" Of course not," Penelope said. "He was too busy crying about how happy he was that I forgave him." "Pathetic," Caldwell spoke again. "Once the hearing is successful, we move him into a care facility within a month. Full access to the accounts. We liquidate the company assets, quietly pay off our debts, and let the business collapse. By the time anyone realizes what happened, the money will be offshore." Penelope leaned down, her face just inches from mine. She whispered, though I could not hear her at the time. The camera picked it up. "You spent 20 years trying to prove you were not a failure, Dad. Tomorrow I am going to prove you were right all along." She straightened and looked at Bradford. "Let us go. We have a wedding in a few hours." The timestamp on the camera read 2:52 in the morning, when they finally left the room, closing the door behind them. At 7:30, my alarm went off. I woke up in a nightmare, my head bare, my suit destroyed, my body aching from a violation I could not remember. I stumbled to the mirror, saw what they had done, and felt the world collapse around me. But I did not know, not yet, that the evidence of everything they had done was already saved. That the camera Gerald had installed had captured every word, every action, every cruel laugh. I did not know that the proof of their conspiracy existed, waiting for the moment I would need it most. The alarm went off at 7:30. The sound drilled into my skull, sharp and relentless. My head throbbed with a pain I had never experienced before, as if someone had taken a hammer to the base of my brain. I reached up to rub my temples, and my hand brushed against something that did not feel right. Stubble. Rough, uneven patches where there should have been hair. I sat up too fast. The room spun. My mouth was dry, my tongue thick and metallic. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stood gripping the nightstand until the dizziness passed. Something was deeply wrong. I walked to the bathroom, each step unsteady, and flipped on the light. The mirror showed me a stranger. My head was completely bare. Not a clean shave, but a butchered one. Patches of scalp were exposed in irregular shapes, some areas scraped raw. Red marks crisscrossed the crown of my head. Small cuts dotted the skin where the blade had pressed too hard. My knees buckled. I grabbed the edge of the sink to keep from collapsing. A memory flashed through my mind. Catherine sitting in bed, running her fingers through my hair, smiling at me. "So I love your silver hair," she had said. "It makes you look distinguished, like someone who has lived a life worth living." Now it was gone. All of it. Torn away while I slept. "Ancharin," I whispered, my voice breaking. What did I do wrong? I forced myself to stand and walked back into the bedroom. I went to the closet, hoping against reason that my tuxedo would still be there untouched. It was not. The suit lay on the floor in pieces. The jacket had been slashed through the shoulders and back, the fabric hanging in ribbons. The shirt was shredded, buttons torn off the collar, destroyed. The trousers were cut into jagged strips. $15,000 reduced to garbage. I knelt beside the wreckage and picked up a piece of the jacket. My vision blurred. I turned toward the wastebasket near the closet and saw silver strands catching the morning light. My hair. Clumps of it still holding their shape, filling the bin. I reached in and pulled out a handful. I sat on the closet floor, clutching the hair, and sobbed. The door opened behind me. I looked up expecting Gerald. Instead, I saw Penelope. She stood in the doorway, her expression perfectly composed. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, her face changed. Her eyes went wide. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God," she said, her voice high and breathless. "Dad, what happened?" I stared at her. My voice came out flat, drained of everything. "You know what happened." Her mask slipped. Just for a second. Her mouth tightened. Her eyes went cold. Then she stepped into the room, Bradford appearing behind her. I stood slowly still, holding the clump of hair. "You did this. You drugged me. You destroyed my suit. You shaved my head while I was unconscious." Bradford crossed his arms and leaned against the doorframe. Penelope tilted her head, studying me the way someone might study an insect. And then she said it. "That old weathered face of yours is not allowed to overshadow my father-in-law. You need to look pathetic enough that people will pity you and maybe give you a seat at their table." "This is my day, Dad, not yours." Her words hit me like a fist to the chest. I took a step back, staring at her, trying to find some trace of the daughter I had raised. There was nothing. Just cold calculation. Bradford pulled a knit beanie and a pair of old work pants from a bag he was carrying. He tossed them onto the floor at my feet. "Put those on," he said. "You are still walking her down the aisle, and you are going to smile and pretend everything is fine." Something inside me snapped. "Get out!" I shouted, my voice raw. "Both of you get out of my house." Penelope did not flinch. She stepped closer, her voice low and venomous. "If you ruin my wedding, I will never forgive you. Do you understand me? You will lose me forever." I laughed, bitter and broken. "I already have." She turned on her heel and walked out. Bradford followed, slamming the door behind them. I stood alone in the wreckage of my bedroom. My head bare, my suit destroyed, my daughter's cruelty ringing in my ears. At 9 o'clock, Gerald arrived. He knocked softly and let himself in when I did not answer. He found me sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. "Sir," he said quietly, "I am so sorry." I did not look at him. "She did it, Gerald. My own daughter." "I know." He walked over and held out a tablet. "You need to see this." I took the tablet. The screen showed black and white footage from the camera in my closet. I pressed play. The timestamp read 1:30 in the morning. Penelope and Bradford entered the frame carrying a bag. I watched as they destroyed my suit, as they called Caldwell on speakerphone, as they shaved my head while I lay motionless in bed. I stopped the video. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the tablet. Gerald knelt in front of me. "Sir, there is more." Howard called. "They found the incompetency petition. The hearing is scheduled for next week. They are planning to have you declared unfit and committed to a psychiatric facility." I looked up at him, my vision clearing for the first time all morning. "Call Howard." I said, my voice steady now. "Call Benjamin. Tell them to meet me at the venue." Gerald blinked. "Sir," I stood up, wiping the tears from my face. "I am going to that wedding, and 500 people are about to see exactly who my daughter really is." I walked to the back of my closet and pulled out an old pair of work clothes I had kept from 25 years ago. Faded jeans, a plain button-down shirt, the kind of clothes I wore when I had nothing but the love of my family to keep me going. I held them in my hands and looked at Gerald. I wore these when I had nothing but hope. Today I will wear them to show the world what I have lost. Within an hour, my home office looked like a command center. Howard sat at the desk with legal files spread in front of him. Gerald stood by the monitor, queuing up footage on a tablet. Benjamin paced near the window, his hands clenched into fists. And I stood in the middle of it, all bald-scarred and ready. At 9:45, Howard arrived. He walked through the door, saw me, and stopped cold. His face went from shock to fury in the span of a breath. "A Roland," he said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "This is criminal assault, battery, drugging. We need to call the police right now. I shook my head. Not yet. I need them to see it first. All of them. At the wedding, Howard opened his mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. Trust me, Howard, please. He closed his mouth and nodded, though I could see the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. At 10 o'clock, Benjamin arrived. He took one look at me and his face crumpled. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled me into a hug, his shoulders shaking. He whispered, his voice breaking. I am so sorry. I tried to warn you. I held him tightly. I know, son. This is not your fault. He pulled back, wiping his eyes. What are we going to do? We are going to show everyone exactly who she is. At 10:15, Gerald set up the tablet on the desk and connected it to the larger monitor. Howard and Benjamin sat down, and I stood behind them. Gerald pressed play. The video started at 1:30 in the morning. We watched in silence as Penelope and Bradford destroyed my tuxedo, as they called Caldwell, as they shaved my head while I lay unconscious. When Penelope's voice came through the speakers, cold and mocking, Benjamin flinched. He actually believed I forgave him. Pathetic. Benjamin stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. How can she be our sister? I put a hand on his shoulder. She is not the person we thought she was. Maybe she never was. At 10:30, Marcus Webb arrived with a thick folder of financial records. He spread them across the desk, pointing to highlighted sections. The Montgomery family is drowning, he said. $8.2 million in debt. The Securities and Exchange Commission is investigating Caldwell for running a Ponzi scheme. Their estate is in foreclosure. They are desperate. Howard leaned forward, scanning the documents. Then he looked up at me, his expression grim. Roland, the incompetency petition was filed yesterday. An emergency motion. The hearing is scheduled for next Wednesday. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means, Howard said slowly, that if the court grants the petition, Penelope becomes your legal guardian. She can make decisions on your behalf. She can commit you to a facility. She can control your assets. Marcus pulled out another document. There is a private care facility in the suburbs. High security. Caldwell Montgomery called them 3 weeks ago asking about availability and costs. I stared at the paper. They were going to make me disappear. Yes, Howard said. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I stood up. Here is what we are going to do, I said. I am going to that wedding. I am going to walk Penelope down the aisle. And when they call me up to give my speech, I am going to tell 500 people exactly what she did. And we are going to play that video on the biggest screen they have. Gerald nodded. The venue has LED displays for the reception. The audiovisual technician owes me a favor. I can connect the tablet to their system. Howard leaned back in his chair, studying me. You understand that once you do this, there is no going back. This will destroy her. She destroyed me first, I said quietly. Howard nodded. Then we do it. And Roland, the truth is an absolute defense. She committed a crime. She cannot sue you for exposing it. But you need to be prepared for the fallout. I am prepared. Gerald looked at my head, his expression uncertain. Sir, should we do something about your appearance? A wig, maybe, or no, I said firmly. Let them see what she did. Every cut, every scar. It is evidence. Benjamin stepped forward. What about Susan? I hesitated. Not yet. I do not want her caught in the middle of this. We will tell her afterward. By 12:30, the plan was set. Howard would be at the venue with the legal documents. Gerald would handle the video. Benjamin would sit in the front row ready to support me. And I would walk my daughter down the aisle knowing it would be the last time I ever spoke to her. I drove alone to the cemetery. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds that threatened rain. I parked near the entrance and walked through the rows of headstones until I reached Catherine's grave. I knelt in the grass in front of the marble stone. I ran my fingers over her name carved deep into the stone. Catherine, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I need to talk to you. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves overhead. Our daughter, she is not the child we raised. She drugged me. She shaved my head while I slept. She planned to have me locked away. My voice cracked. I took a breath and continued. I'm about to destroy her wedding. I'm going to humiliate her in front of 500 people. Am I wrong, Catherine? Am I making a mistake? Silence. Just the wind and the distant sound of traffic. I closed my eyes. No, you would not forgive this. You taught our children about integrity, about honesty, about consequences. You would not let this stand. I stood slowly, brushing the grass from my knees. I kept my promise. I took care of them for 20 years. But Penelope does not want to be taken care of anymore. She wants to take, and I cannot let her. I turned and walked back to the car. At 2:45 in the afternoon, I pulled into the parking lot of Harrington Estate. The venue was stunning, a sprawling mansion surrounded by manicured gardens and fountains. Cars filled the lot, expensive sedans, and luxury vehicles gleaming in the weak sunlight. I parked near the back and sat for a moment staring at the building. Inside, my daughter was preparing to become a bride. In 75 minutes, the ceremony would begin, and then at the reception, I would stand up. I would tell the truth. And I would watch her world collapse. I got out of the car, straightened my old work shirt, and walked toward the entrance. Harrington Estate looked like something out of a fairy tale. White roses climbed the stone walls. A string quartet played soft classical music near the entrance. Guests arrived in designer suits and gowns, stepping out of luxury cars with practiced elegance. Everything was perfect. Everything was beautiful. And then there was me, bald-scarred, wearing a faded work shirt and jeans from a time when I had nothing but hope. Benjamin pulled into the circular drive at 3 o'clock. He parked near the valet station and turned to me, his expression uncertain. Dad, are you sure about this? I nodded. More sure than I have been about anything in 20 years. I opened the door and stepped out. The afternoon sun was bright, unforgiving. It lit up every mark on my scalp, every uneven patch where the razor had scraped too hard. I did not try to hide it. I stood tall, shoulders back, and walked toward the entrance. The valet attendant stared. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. He looked away quickly, pretending he had not seen me. But the guests saw. A woman in a pale blue dress nudged her husband and whispered something. He turned, looked at me, and his eyebrows shot up. Another couple stopped mid-conversation, their eyes following me as I walked past. I heard fragments of their whispers. Who is that? My God, is that the bride's father? What happened to him? I kept walking, my head high. Let them stare. Let them wonder. They would have their answers soon enough. Inside the grand foyer, the wedding coordinator stood near a table covered in place cards. She was a thin woman in her 40s, holding a clipboard, directing staff with sharp, efficient gestures. When she saw me, she froze. Her eyes went from my face to my head to my clothes. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Good afternoon, I said calmly. I am looking for my daughter. Where is the bridal suite? She blinked, recovering slightly. Mr. Bannerman, I was told you would be arriving closer to the ceremony time. Change of plans, I said. The bridal suite. She pointed down a hallway, still staring. Second door on the left, but I believe she is still getting ready. Perhaps you could wait in the... I was already walking. More guests were arriving now, filling the foyer, moving toward the ceremony space in the garden. I saw their reactions as I passed. Shock, confusion, pity. Some turned away quickly, embarrassed for me. Others could not stop staring. At 3:15, someone must have told Penelope I was there. The door to the bridal suite flew open, and she came rushing out wearing a silk robe over what I assumed was her wedding dress. Her hair was pinned up, her makeup half finished. Her face was pale with panic. "Hate," she hissed, grabbing my arm and pulling me aside. "Why are you here so early?" I looked at her calmly. "I came to attend your wedding." "Is that not what you wanted?" Her eyes flicked to my head, then to my clothes. Her grip on my arm tightened. "Why are you not wearing the beanie? Why did you not—" She stopped herself, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. I chose something more authentic," I said quietly. Bradford appeared behind her, his expression tight with irritation. Penelope turned to him, then back to me, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "Dad, please, can you just stay in the back? Do not walk around. Do not talk to people. Just sit quietly until the ceremony starts." I tilted my head. "You want me to hide?" Her jaw clenched. Tears welled in her eyes, though I knew they were for show. "Just until after the ceremony. Then you can give your speech. Please, Dad. This is my day." I smiled cold and steady. "Oh, do not worry, Penelope. I will give my speech. I have prepared very thoroughly." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the hallway, her face a mask of barely contained panic. I did not hide. I walked into the guest seating area and found a chair near the middle where everyone could see me. I sat down, folded my hands in my lap, and waited. 5 employees from Bannerman Technologies were seated a few rows ahead. Janet, the marketing director. Michael, the head of operations. Sarah, my executive assistant. David and Lisa from the development team. They had all worked with me for years. When they saw me, they stood and came over, their faces full of concern. "Sir," Janet said quietly, kneeling beside my chair. "Are you all right? What happened?" I looked at her, and for a moment I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. But I kept my voice steady. "It is a complicated family matter," I said. "But everyone is going to know soon." Michael frowned. "Is there anything we can do?" I shook my head. "Just stay. When I give my speech as the father of the bride later, please stay. Do not leave early." They exchanged glances, confused, but they nodded. "We will stay," Janet said. At 3:25, Caldwell and Evelyn Montgomery arrived. They walked into the seating area like royalty, greeting guests with practiced smiles and firm handshakes. When Caldwell saw me, his smile faltered. His eyes swept over my appearance, and his lip curled slightly in disgust. He walked over, standing just close enough to be polite, but far enough to keep his distance. "Interesting wardrobe choice, Roland," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. I looked up at him and smiled. "It is a beautiful venue. You must be very proud." He did not respond. He just turned and walked away, moving faster than necessary. Janet leaned over and whispered, "Those people are terrible." I smiled faintly. "You have no idea." At 3:30, Gerald slipped into the audio-visual control room at the back of the ballroom. The technician, a young man with headphones around his neck, greeted him with a nod. "Everything is set," Gerald said quietly. "When Mr. Bannerman gives his speech, I will need you to switch the input to this tablet." The technician glanced at the device Gerald handed him. "What is on it, to?" "The truth," Gerald said. At 4 o'clock, the string quartet began to play. The music swelled soft and elegant, filling the garden. 500 guests stood turning toward the aisle. Penelope appeared at the entrance in a $30,000 wedding gown, her bouquet of white roses held perfectly in her hands. She smiled radiant and composed the picture of a perfect bride. She did not know that in 2 hours, that smile would shatter into 1,000 pieces. I had been to many weddings in my life. Catherine and I had married in a small church with 20 guests, simple vows, and a reception in the fellowship hall with homemade cake. But I had never been to a wedding where I knew I was about to destroy it. The ceremony began at 4 o'clock. I sat in the third row, not the first. Penelope had made sure of that. She had quietly rearranged the seating chart so that I would be tucked away out of sight where the cameras would not catch me in the family photos. Benjamin sat beside me, his hands folded tightly in his lap. He leaned over and whispered, "Dad, are you okay?" I nodded slowly. "I am thinking about your mother. She would have hated this." The string quartet swelled into the bridal march. 500 guests rose to their feet. Penelope appeared at the entrance, framed by white roses and afternoon sunlight. Her wedding gown was breathtaking, all silk and lace, with a train that swept the ground behind her. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "She is beautiful," someone whispered. She was, and she walked alone. I had always assumed she would ask me to walk her down the aisle. When she was 8 years old, she had climbed into my lap and asked, "Daddy, when I get married, will you walk me down the aisle?" I had kissed her forehead and promised I would, but she had never asked. And now I understood why. She had already erased me in her mind long before today. The officiant stood at the front, his voice calm and practiced. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." I stopped listening. I watched Penelope instead. Her face was radiant, glowing with happiness. There was no guilt in her eyes, no hesitation, no acknowledgement of what she had done to me just hours before. She smiled at Bradford, and he smiled back, and I realized she truly believed she had done nothing wrong. The vows began. Penelope's voice rang out clear and confident. "I, Penelope, take you, Bradford, to be my lawfully wedded husband." My jaw clenched. I thought of the video, of her voice in the dark mocking me while I lay unconscious, of her plan to have me declared incompetent to take everything I had built. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife. Bradford kissed her. The crowd erupted into applause, 500 people clapping and cheering. I sat perfectly still, my hands resting on my knees. I did not clap. At 5 o'clock, the guests moved to the cocktail hour on the terrace. I stood off to the side near a column watching. People mingled, sipping champagne, their voices rising in a hum of polite conversation. I heard fragments as they passed. "Did you see the father of the bride? What happened to him? I heard he has cancer, poor man." "No, I think it was an accident. A car crash, maybe?" I said nothing. I let the rumors grow. Let them wonder. The truth would come soon enough. Caldwell Montgomery held court near the bar, surrounded by guests who nodded along to his booming voice. I caught a snippet of his speech as I walked past. Very pleased with this merger." He laughed, catching himself. "I mean this marriage, a wonderful union of two families." A few guests chuckled nervously. I kept walking. At 6 o'clock, the guests were invited into the grand ballroom for dinner. The room was spectacular. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Tables were draped in white linen and covered in arrangements of white roses and orchids. A massive LED screen stood at the front of the room, flanked by speakers. The MC, a polished man in his 50s, stood at a podium near the head table. His voice boomed through the sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome for the first time as husband and wife, Mr. and Mrs. Bradford Montgomery." The crowd erupted into applause. Penelope and Bradford entered, waving, glowing. Dinner was served. I barely touched my plate. I sat at a table near the back, Benjamin on one side, Howard on the other. Gerald was somewhere in the AV booth making final preparations. The speeches began. First, the best man. Trent Morrison, a college friend of Bradford's, stood and delivered a generic toast about love and friendship and the future. The crowd clapped politely. Next, the maid of honor. Amanda Pierce, one of Penelope's sorority sisters, gave a forced saccharine speech about how perfect Penelope was. Her voice wavered. She did not believe a word she was saying. Then Evelyn Montgomery stood. She smiled at the crowd, her voice warm and rehearsed. Penelope is exactly the kind of woman our family needs. Smart, ambitious, and beautiful. We could not be prouder to welcome her into the Montgomery legacy. I gritted my teeth. Legacy. They had nothing left but debt. The MC returned to the podium. He glanced down at his notes, then looked up with a practiced smile. And now the father of the bride, Mr. Roland Bannerman. Penelope's head snapped toward the MC. Her eyes went wide. She shook her head frantically, making a slashing motion across her throat. Her lips moved, mouthing the words, "Skip him." The MC saw her. His expression flickered with confusion, but he was a professional. He looked back at the crowd and continued smoothly. "Mr. Bannerman, your speech, sir." 500 faces turned toward me. The whispers started immediately. "That is her father. My God, what happened to him?" Caldwell leaned over to Evelyn and muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "This could be a problem." I stood. My chair scraped against the floor. The whispers grew louder. I walked slowly toward the front of the room, my footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. Every eye was on me. Every head turned to follow my path. I climbed the 3 steps onto the stage. The MC handed me the microphone, his expression uncertain. I took it, feeling the weight of it in my hand. I turned to face the crowd. 500 people stared back at me. In the front row, Penelope sat frozen, her face pale, her eyes wide with horror. I lifted the microphone and spoke. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here." My voice was steady, calm. I paused, letting the silence settle. Then I said, "You must be wondering why the father of the bride looks like this." The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. "Let me explain." 500 people leaned forward. The ballroom went perfectly still. "Before the screens light up, I need to know you're still listening. Comment the number 500, representing the 500 guests about to witness this exposure. I want you here with me on this journey. Please note, this story contains dramatized elements reconstructed for educational purposes. If you feel uncomfortable, you're completely free to exit right now." Public speaking had never frightened me. I had pitched to investors, delivered keynote addresses, at conferences, stood in front of boardrooms full of skeptics, and convinced them to believe in my vision. But standing in front of 500 people about to destroy my daughter's life, my hands trembled. Not from fear, from a controlled, burning rage that had been building for hours. I gripped the microphone tighter and spoke. "You must be wondering why the father of the bride looks like he just lost a battle." A few forced laughs rippled through the crowd. Then they died, swallowed by the tension in the room. "Some of you may know me. Roland Bannerman. I built Bannerman Technologies from nothing. Started in my garage 20 years ago. Today it is worth $60 million. A few guests nodded recognition, flickering across their faces. I saw a couple of people whisper to each other, confirming the name. But before the success, I was just a husband and a father trying to survive one day at a time. My voice dropped quieter now, more deliberate. 20 years ago, I lost my wife, Catherine, to cancer. She was 43 years old. Penelope was 13. Benjamin was 10. The crowd began to quiet. A few people leaned forward, listening. I remember holding her hand in that hospital room, the machines beeping, the kids crying in the hallway because they were too young to understand what was happening. My voice trembled. I did not try to hide it. Catherine's last words to me were, "Promise me you will take care of our babies. Make sure they know they are loved." Several women in the crowd wiped their eyes. I saw tears on faces I did not recognize. I kept that promise. For 20 years, I kept it. I looked directly at Penelope. She was pale, frozen in her seat, her hands gripping the edge of the table. I worked 3 jobs to keep the house. I learned to braid hair from YouTube because Penelope missed her mother. I attended every father-daughter dance even though my heart ached because Catherine was not there to see it. I paused, letting the words settle. I built a company so my children would never have to struggle the way I did. The crowd was silent now, nodding along. Some guests looked at Penelope with sympathy. I turned to her. Penelope, do you remember what I said to you on your 18th birthday? She opened her mouth, her voice shaking. Dad, maybe we should. I said, everything I have is yours. Just remember where you came from. Remember your mother's values. Be kind. I let the silence hang. Then I said, last night my daughter drugged me without my consent, shaved my head while I was unconscious, and destroyed my wedding clothes. Gasps erupted across the ballroom. Heads turned toward Penelope. Whispers exploded like wildfire. Penelope shot to her feet. Dad, stop. You are confused. I ignored her. My voice stayed calm, steady. I woke up this morning and found my head had been shaved, brutally, with cut scars and marks all over my scalp. I touched the top of my head, tilting it toward the cameras that were still rolling. Let them see. Let everyone see. My $15,000 custom tuxedo was slashed into pieces. I pulled out my phone and held up a photo of the destroyed suit. The crowd gasped again. At first, I could not understand what had happened. I drank tea before bed. Tea my daughter brought to me. She told me it was chamomile, my wife's recipe. I looked at Penelope. Her face was white. The sedative you put in that tea was hospital grade. Bradford stood up, his face red. Mr. Bannerman, you need to sit down. My voice rose, cutting through his. While I was unconscious, my daughter and her husband shaved my head because her father-in-law, Caldwell Montgomery, is insecure about his own appearance. I pointed directly at Caldwell. 500 heads turned in unison. Caldwell's face went crimson. That is ridiculous. They did not want me to overshadow him. I said, my voice steady and cold. So they violated me while I slept. The crowd erupted. Murmurs turned to shouts. Guests stood looking between me and the head table. Some pulled out their phones recording. Penelope's voice broke through the chaos, desperate and shrill. He is lying. My father has been erratic lately. We have been worried about his mental state. She was playing the victim, now tears streaming down her face. Dad has been taking too much medication. He does not remember things clearly. We were trying to help him. A few guests hesitated, glancing at each other. Some of them were starting to doubt me. Bradford stepped forward, his voice earnest. We have been very worried about his health. We were planning to get him help after the wedding. Penelope, I said calmly, cutting him off. Do you want to tell them, or should I? She froze. Tell them what? Be about the $8.2 million debt your new family is drowning in, about the federal fraud investigation into Caldwell Montgomery, about the foreclosure on their estate, Hilco. Caldwell shot to his feet. Those are lies. Or, I continued, my voice rising. Should I tell them about the incompetency petition your husband's lawyer filed yesterday? The one where they plan to have me declared mentally unfit, commit me to a psychiatric facility, and steal my company. Bradford went pale. The crowd erupted into chaos. People stood shouting questions. Cameras flashed. Phones were raised, capturing everything. Penelope's mask shattered. Her face twisted with rage. Dad, shut up! She realized her mistake immediately and slapped a hand over her mouth. But it was too late. 500 people had heard her. I looked toward the back of the room. Gerald stood near the AV booth waiting. I nodded. He signaled the technician. I turned back to the crowd and spoke into the microphone one more time. Ladies and gentlemen, I understand this is hard to believe. So let me show you exactly what happened. The massive LED screens on either side of the stage flickered to life. Penelope's head snapped toward the screens. Her eyes went wide. She saw the timestamp. She saw the night vision footage. She knew. Shoo, she whispered, then louder, panicked. No, but it was too late. The video began. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. This video was worth my entire company, my daughter's reputation, and the truth I had been robbed of. All 10 LED screens around the ballroom blazed to life in perfect synchronization. Every guest in the room could see them no matter where they sat. I spoke into the microphone, my voice steady. This is security camera footage from my home. The timestamp appeared in the corner of every screen. White text on black night vision. 1:47 in the morning. Wedding day. The footage showed the inside of my closet. The camera angle was high, looking down at the rack where my tuxedo had hung just hours before. The door opened. Penelope and Bradford stepped inside carrying a black duffel bag. The audio came through crystal clear over the ballroom speakers. Penelope's voice. He is completely out. I gave him triple the dose. Gasps erupted across the ballroom. Heads whipped toward the screens. Some guests stood unable to believe what they were hearing. On the screens, Bradford pulled scissors from the bag. He grabbed my tuxedo jacket and began slashing through the fabric. Long, deliberate cuts. The sound of ripping cloth filled the ballroom. Penelope laughed. God, this feels amazing. A woman in the front row screamed. Oh my God! Guests all over the room pulled out their phones to record the screens, to capture this moment, to make sure it could never be denied. The video continued. Bradford moved through the suit piece by piece. The shirt, the trousers, everything destroyed in less than 2 minutes. When they were done, they left the closet and moved toward my bedroom. The audio shifted. The buzz of an electric razor filled the ballroom. Then a phone rang. A call connecting over speakerphone. A voice I recognized immediately. Caldwell Montgomery. Good, Caldwell said. Remember, make it look amateur. Uneven patches, cuts. We need visible injuries for the photos. The ballroom erupted. The father-in-law was in on this. Caldwell shot to his feet, his face purple with rage. This is fake. This is doctored footage. I spoke calmly into the microphone. It has a timestamp. It has been authenticated by forensic experts. Keep watching. Penelope's voice came through the speakers again. Yes, Father Caldwell. Caldwell's voice continued over the phone. Perfect. Tomorrow, when he acts out at the wedding, we will have the before photos. Then the after photos of him looking erratic and unstable. The judge will have no choice but to grant the petition. The video showed Penelope and Bradford returning to the closet, disposing of the destroyed tuxedo in a trash bag. The camera captured everything. Penelope holding the electric razor, strands of my silver hair stuck to the blade. Bradford taking photos with his phone. Dad wants documentation, Bradford said on the video. Caldwell's voice came through again, laying out the plan for the incompetency hearing. The timeline. The doctors they had lined up. The care facility where they planned to send me. On the screen, Penelope stepped back and looked toward my bedroom, where I lay unconscious. Now he looks pathetic, she said. Exactly what we need. Guests around the ballroom covered their mouths. Some were crying. Bradford's voice came through the speakers. What about the girlfriend, Susan? Caldwell replied. Already excluded from the guest list. Bannerman is isolated. No one will believe him when he claims we did this. Penelope laughed on the screen. A cold, satisfied sound. Her voice continued. Dad actually believed I forgave him. 20 years of trying to buy my love. Pathetic. Benjamin stood up from his seat, his voice breaking. Penny, how could you? Penelope turned toward him, tears streaming down her face. No, Benjamin, he edited the footage. But the audio kept playing, Caldwell's voice. Once the hearing is successful, we commit him to the care facility within a month. Full access to the accounts. We liquidate the company assets, quietly pay off our debts, and let the business collapse. Bradford's voice. What about the brother? Benjamin gets nothing. Caldwell said. Once we control the company, he has no legal standing. By the time he realizes what happened, the money will be offshore. The crowd roared with outrage. The final piece of audio played. Penelope's voice, quiet now, almost reflective. You know what he said after Mom died? He said we did everything we could. But it was not enough. He spent 20 years trying to prove he was not a failure. Tomorrow I am going to prove he was right all along. I stood by the microphone, tears streaming down my face, but I did not move. I let the words hang in the air. Benjamin was sobbing now, his face in his hands. Penny, Mom loved you so much. How could you do this? The final moment of the video played. Penelope standing over me while I lay unconscious in bed. She leaned down close to my face and whispered, I sleep well, Daddy. Tomorrow you lose everything. The screens went black. The timestamp read 2:52 in the morning. The ballroom descended into chaos. Penelope screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. It is fake. It is a deep fake. Bradford grabbed her arm and hissed, Shut up! Caldwell tried to push his way toward the exit, but guests stood up and blocked his path. People were shouting. Phones were raised everywhere, recording the fallout, posting clips to social media in real time. I stood at the microphone silent and let the chaos unfold around me for 30 seconds. Then I tapped the mic lightly. The sound cut through the noise. The crowd began to quiet. I spoke. Ladies and gentlemen, there is more. Penelope's head snapped toward me. Her face was streaked with tears and ruined makeup. Dad, please, please do not do this. I looked at her. My voice was cold, steady. Now you want to call me Dad? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Howard Bennett stood from his seat near the back and walked toward the stage carrying a leather briefcase. The crowd parted to let him through. The video evidence had proven what they did, but I needed to prove why. I needed 500 people to understand that this was not a family dispute. This was organized financial crime. I took the microphone and gestured toward Howard. This is Howard Bennett, my attorney and my best friend for 35 years. Howard stepped up beside me, opening the leather briefcase and pulling out a stack of documents. His demeanor was calm, professional. He had done this 1,000 times in courtrooms. Now he was doing it in a ballroom. Good evening, Howard said into the microphone. I represent Mr. Bannerman. What you just witnessed on that video is criminal conspiracy. But you need to understand the full scope of it. He nodded to Gerald in the AV booth. The LED screens lit up again this time, displaying a financial spreadsheet. Montgomery Family Trust. Assets and liabilities. The numbers were damning. Total assets, $2.1 million. All of it mortgaged or under lien. Total liabilities, $8.2 million. Net worth negative $6.1 million. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Caldwell shot to his feet, his face red. That is confidential. Howard did not flinch. Not when you conspire to defraud my client. Then it becomes relevant evidence. The next page appeared on the screen. An official letter with the seal of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Howard read aloud. The Montgomery Investment Group is under federal investigation for operating an illegal Ponzi scheme. Between the years of 2019 and 2023, Mr. Caldwell Montgomery is alleged to have defrauded investors of approximately $12 million. The crowd erupted. Shouts of disbelief. Evelyn turned to Caldwell, her voice shrill. You told me that was settled, Caldwell hissed. Shut up, Evelyn. Howard continued, his voice cutting through the noise. The SEC is preparing charges. Mr. Montgomery is facing up to 20 years in federal prison. The next document appeared. A foreclosure notice. The Montgomery estate is in foreclosure. The bank is scheduled to auction the property next month. Bradford stood up, his face pale. "This is private." Howard's voice rose. "It stopped being private when you conspired to steal $60 million. He gestured toward the side of the stage. Marcus Webb, the private investigator, stepped forward and took the second microphone. "I have been investigating the Montgomery family for 3 months at Mr. Bennett's request," Marcus said. His voice was steady, factual. "Let me walk you through what we found." The screen changed to a timeline. February 2024, Caldwell Montgomery instructs his son Bradford to identify wealthy targets. March 2024, Bradford meets Penelope Bannerman at a charity gala. March 2024, Caldwell conducts background check on Roland Bannerman. Net worth $60 million. April 2024, Bradford proposes to Penelope after 2 months of dating. Marcus spoke. This was not love. This was a business transaction. The screen shifted to email evidence. Messages pulled from Bradford's account. Caldwell to Bradford. February 2024. Target has significant liquid assets. Expedite marriage. We need access within 6 months or creditors will force bankruptcy. Bradford to Penelope, March 2024. Dad says we need him to sign the transfer documents. Can you handle it? Penelope to Bradford. March 2024. Done. He signed everything. Trusts me completely. Idiot. The crowd reacted with horror. Several people were openly crying now. I stood to the side, tears streaming down my face, but I did not look away. Marcus continued. The incompetency petition was filed yesterday. 3 doctors signed affidavits claiming Mr. Bannerman was mentally unfit. He held up copies of the affidavits. I contacted all 3 doctors. All 3 admitted they were paid $10,000 each by Caldwell Montgomery to sign their names without ever examining Mr. Bannerman. He paused. That is medical fraud. Howard took the microphone back. Now here is the most disturbing part. He held up a document. The prenuptial agreement. He projected a specific clause onto the screens. Section 7.3, Inheritance Acceleration Clause. In the event that Penelope's father, Roland Bannerman, dies or is declared legally incompetent within 24 months of the marriage date, Penelope shall immediately inherit 60% of his estate. The ballroom went silent. People were processing what they had just heard. Howard let it sink in. Then he said, if Roland dies or is declared incompetent within 2 years, Penelope and Bradford immediately receive approximately $45 million. He paused. This clause is essentially an incentive for his early absence. The crowd erupted again. They were planning to... Oh my God! Howard held up a hand. I am not saying they planned to harm him, but they did plan incompetency proceedings. And this clause would benefit enormously from his permanent absence. He looked directly at Caldwell and Bradford. You two might want to hire criminal defense attorneys. Penelope screamed, her voice breaking. We were not going to hurt him. That is insane. Howard's voice stayed calm. Perhaps. But you did plan to commit him, declare him incompetent, and drain his assets. And with this clause, his absence would be very financially convenient. He began listing charges on his fingers. Assault and drugging, conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false medical documents, 3 doctors guilty of fraud, a financial scheme under SEC investigation, fraudulent marriage, an incompetency incentive clause. He turned to the crowd. The state prosecutor is going to have a field day. Marcus added, I recorded a conversation with Bradford's attorney last week. He admitted the incompetency petition was a creative legal maneuver to access assets. That lawyer is now facing disbarment and charges of his own. Caldwell stood desperate. This is all circumstantial, Howard smiled coldly. We have video of your family violating my client while you gave instructions over speakerphone. We have emails discussing targets. We have financial records proving bankruptcy. We have a contract that reads like an incentive to harm. There is nothing circumstantial here." He turned back to the crowd. "All of you are witnesses. 500 phones were recording. Like this footage will be subpoenaed. This wedding video is now Exhibit A in multiple criminal trials." He pointed at Penelope Bradford and Caldwell. "You are all going to prison." Penelope collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Bradford was arguing with his parents. Evelyn was in hysterics. Howard looked at me. I nodded. He handed the microphone back. I stood there for a moment looking out at the crowd, at the devastation, at the chaos, at my daughter broken and exposed. And then I heard movement behind me. Benjamin stood up from his seat and walked toward the stage. His face was streaked with tears, but his expression was resolute. I stepped aside and handed him the microphone. I had thought Howard's evidence would be the final blow. But my son Benjamin had something to say, and his words would cut deeper than any legal document ever could. "Before my son Benjamin takes the stage, I need confirmation you're still here. Type family in the comments if you're invested in hearing how this ends. The next part will hit hard emotionally. Important note: certain details have been reconstructed to convey the message clearly if you'd rather not continue. This is your moment to step away." My son Benjamin had been silent through the entire speech. I saw him crying in his seat, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles had gone white. When he stood and walked toward the microphone, I did not try to stop him. The ballroom was silent in the wake of Howard's devastating evidence. Benjamin made his way to the stage, his face streaked with tears, but his expression resolute. He took the microphone from me. "Can I say something?" I nodded. "Ben, you do not have to." "I have to," he said. His voice was steady, but I could hear the pain beneath it. He turned to face the crowd. 500 people watched, but his eyes were only on one person. Penelope sat at the head table, her head down, her hands covering her face. Benjamin spoke. "Penelope, look at me." She did not move. His voice rose. "Look at me." She finally lifted her head. Her mascara was smeared down her cheeks. Her eyes were red and hollow. Benjamin's voice trembled. "When Mom died, I was 10 years old." "Do you remember?" Penelope whispered. "Ben, please do not." "I barely remember her face anymore," Benjamin said. "It has been 20 years. Sometimes I look at pictures and I do not recognize her." Tears streamed down his face. "But Dad remembers. Dad remembers everything." He turned, slightly gesturing toward me. "Every single night for 20 years, Dad has talked to Mom's picture before he goes to sleep." The crowd was completely silent. "I have heard him through the walls. Catherine Penelope got a promotion. You would be so proud. Or Penny is getting married, love. I wish you were here." I stood off to the side, tears running openly down my face. Benjamin's voice cracked. "Last week I went to Dad's office. He did not know I was there. I heard him practicing this speech, talking to Mom's picture on his desk." He paused, his breath shaking. "He was crying, and he said, 'Our little girl is getting married, Catherine.' I did it. I kept my promise. I took good care of our babies." Several guests in the crowd broke down. Women were sobbing openly. Men wiped their eyes. Benjamin turned back to Penelope. "Do you understand everything Dad has done for 20 years has been for us? For you. He talks to a photograph every night because he needs Mom's guidance, because he promised her he would take care of us, and he has never, not once, broken that promise." His voice grew harder. "And you just destroyed him." The anger rose in his voice, now hot and raw. "You blamed Dad for Mom's death. I remember. You screamed at him that he was a failure, that if he had made more money, she could have been saved." Penelope sobbed. "I was a child. I was grieving." Benjamin's voice turned sharp. "You were 13. I was 10. Do you think I was not grieving? But I did not spend 20 years punishing Dad for something that was not his fault. He took a step closer to the edge of the stage. Mom died of cancer, Penny. Not poverty. Not lack of money. It was a disease beyond anyone's control. He slammed his hand on the podium. Dad worked himself to exhaustion, trying to prove to you that he was not a failure. He built a $60 million company. Do you know what he did with that money? He saved it for us. For your wedding. For our futures. He was going to give you a $5 million house. $5 million. Benjamin's voice broke with disbelief. Do you know what Dad kept for himself? The same car he has driven for 15 years. The same house we grew up in. The same simple life. Because everything he earned he wanted to give to you. He turned to the crowd. My father is the most selfless man I have ever known. He turned back to Penelope. And my sister is the most selfish. Penelope tried to speak. You do not understand what it was like. Benjamin cut her off. What shadow, the one in your head? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. You know what this is really about? Benjamin said. You hated that Dad was self-made, that he was not old money like the Montgomerys. You were ashamed of him, of us, of where we came from. He pointed at the Montgomery family. So you chose them. Bankrupt criminals in expensive suits. His voice softened, turning sad. You want to know the worst part? Dad would have forgiven you, even after all of this. If you had come to him today and said, Dad, I am in trouble, help me, he would have helped. Because that is who he is. He looked at me. Right, Dad. I nodded, unable to speak. Benjamin turned back to Penelope. But you did not do that. You drugged him. You humiliated him. You mocked him. You called him pathetic. You laughed while you shaved his head. His voice rose to a shout. Well, guess what? You lost everything. You lost Dad. You lost me. You lost your reputation, your career, and probably your freedom. A single person in the crowd began to clap. Slow, deliberate. Then another joined. The applause built, spreading across the ballroom. Benjamin's final words were quiet, but they cut like a blade. Mom would be ashamed of you, Penelope broke. Do not say that. Benjamin's voice was ice. She would be, and you know it. You are not my sister anymore. He set the microphone down and walked over to me. He wrapped his arms around me, and I held him tightly. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was on its feet. 500 people giving a standing ovation. At a wedding, the guests were applauding the father, not the bride. Penelope covered her face with her hands. Bradford grabbed her arm. We need to leave. Now, the head of security approached Caldwell. Sir, the police are at the entrance. They would like to speak with you. Caldwell went pale. Evelyn shrieked, I want my lawyer. I raised my hand, signaling for quiet. The applause slowly faded. I stepped back to the microphone. Benjamin stood beside me. Thank you, I said, my voice hoarse. I have one last thing to do. I reached into my vest and pulled out a folded document. The paper was crisp official. It had been there all night waiting. In my vest pocket was a document worth $5.2 million. A deed to the lakefront estate at 847 Shoreline Drive, the house Catherine and I used to walk past when we were poor, dreaming of buying it for our daughter someday. I pulled the envelope from my pocket and held it up. Before we end tonight, I want to show you something. I opened it and pulled out the legal document. The deed to the lakefront estate at 847 Shoreline Drive. Gasps rippled through the crowd. They recognized the address. One of the most expensive properties in the county. 8,000 square feet. Custom built. Appraised at $5.2 million. Gerald projected images onto the LED screens. The mansion appeared in all its glory. White columns, wraparound porches, sunset over the lake. The guests murmured in awe. 20 years ago, when Catherine was alive and we were still struggling, we used to drive past this property when it was under construction. My voice softened. Catherine used to say, "Maybe someday when Penny gets married we can buy her something like that." After Catherine died, I made it my mission. Every dollar I saved went toward this. 10 years ago, this property went up for sale. I bought it. $5.2 million. I have maintained it, paid the taxes, kept it ready, waiting for Penelope's wedding day. And this was the gift I planned to give. I held the deed high in the air. This document has been in my jacket pocket for 2 days. I paused, letting the silence build. So Penelope, surprise. She stared at me, the realization dawning on her face. This house was yours. Everything I built was for you. But you threw it away when you drugged me and tried to steal my company. I gripped the deed with both hands. Slowly, deliberately, I tore it in half. The crowd gasped. I tore it again and again. The pieces fell like confetti drifting to the stage floor. This property will no longer belong to Penelope. Instead, it will be donated to a new organization I am founding, the Catherine Bannerman Foundation for Elder Care. Applause erupted. This foundation will provide legal support housing and advocacy for elderly people who have been betrayed by their own children. Well, my wife's name will help people whose families tried to destroy them, the way mine tried to destroy me. I looked directly at Penelope. Your mother's legacy will be kindness. What will yours be? Penelope collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Dad, please! My voice turned to ice. Do not call me that. You lost that right when you called me pathetic. I pulled out another document. This is my last will and testament. Updated last week. 50% to my son Benjamin, who actually loves me. Benjamin's eyes filled with tears. Dad, 40% to the Catherine Bannerman Foundation. 10% to various charities. To Penelope Bannerman Montgomery, nothing. Not a dollar, not a share, not a memory. A voice called from the back of the ballroom. Roland. Everyone turned. Susan Miller stood at the entrance, wearing a simple navy dress. I was stunned. Susan, I thought. She walked down the aisle, her expression calm and determined. You thought I would let you face this alone. The crowd parted for her. She climbed the steps to the stage. I know I was not invited, but I was not about to let you do this without someone who actually loves you by your side. My voice broke. You came. Of course I came. We embraced. The crowd erupted in applause. Susan turned to Penelope, her voice calm and cutting. Catherine would have wanted someone here who cares about him. I nodded, unable to speak. She would have liked you. Benjamin stepped forward. Mom would have loved you. The three of us stood together, united. I turned back to the microphone one last time. Penelope. She looked up, her face streaked with mascara and tears. This morning you asked me why I was embarrassing you. You said this was your day, your wedding. You were right. This is your day. This is what you built. I gestured to the chaos around us. Police officers entering the ballroom. Guests recording everything. Reputation destroyed. You wanted to marry into the Montgomerys, congratulations. You married criminals. You wanted me to look pathetic. Look around. Who is the pathetic one here? You are no longer my daughter. I release you from this family. As far as I am concerned, Catherine and I only ever had one child, Benjamin. I dropped the microphone. The sound echoed through the ballroom. I took Susan's hand. I placed my other hand on Benjamin's shoulder. Together we walked toward the exit. The crowd rose to their feet. Another standing ovation following us as we walked. Behind me I heard Penelope screaming. Caldwell being read his rights, and I did not look back. Not even once. The last thing I heard as the ballroom doors closed behind us was my daughter screaming my name. Not Dad, not Father, just Roland. Like I was a stranger. I guess I was. We walked through the lobby toward the exit, Benjamin, Susan, and I. Behind us, the ballroom doors muffled the chaos we had left behind. We were almost at the entrance when the doors burst open. Caldwell Montgomery came charging through. His face read his movements unsteady, drunk, furious. "You destroyed everything!" he roared. He lunged at me. His fist swung wild, glancing off my shoulder. The impact was weak, clumsy, but it sent me stumbling backward. Benjamin stepped between us immediately. "Get away from my father!" Security guards tackled Caldwell before his fist connected. Two men grabbed his arms and forced him to the ground. Caldwell thrashed, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Do you know who I am? I will ruin you." Police officers rushed in from outside. They had been waiting. One of them knelt beside Caldwell, pulling out handcuffs. "Sir, you are under arrest for assault." Caldwell was still screaming as they cuffed his wrists. "I am Caldwell Montgomery. My family built this town." The officer read him his Miranda rights, while two other officers dragged him toward the exit. Guests poured out of the ballroom, phones raised, recording everything. The video of Caldwell's attack was already being uploaded. I stood there, shaking. Susan steadied me. "I am all right," I said, though my voice did not sound convincing. Howard appeared from the crowd. "Roland, my car is out back. Come with me." Gerald joined us, tablet in hand. "Sir, the video has been uploaded to secure servers and sent to the police. You are protected." A police officer approached. "Mr. Bannerman, we will need your statement." Howard stepped in. "Tomorrow. He has been through enough tonight." The officer nodded. "We have video evidence, hundreds of witnesses." He glanced at his phone. "It is already on social media. The hashtag Justice for Roland is trending." In Howard's car, I sat in the back seat between Susan and Benjamin. Gerald sat in the passenger seat with his tablet scrolling through social media. He turned the screen toward us. "Sir, you need to see this. Social media. Trending number 1, Justice for Roland. Trending number 3, Montgomery exposed." A video of my speech had 2 million views. Posted 1 hour ago. The comments were overwhelming. "This man is a hero." 500,000 likes. "That daughter should be in prison." 450,000 likes. Dozens of guests had posted photos, video clips, screenshots. The story was everywhere. A local news outlet had shared it. "Connecticut businessman exposes betrayal at daughter's wedding." Gerald kept scrolling. "Sir, there are interview requests from CNN, CNBC." I closed my eyes. No interviews. Howard spoke from the driver's seat. "Smart. Let the evidence speak for itself." Susan squeezed my hand. "How do you feel?" I thought about it. Numb, empty, free. Benjamin rested his head on my shoulder. "You were incredible, Dad." I shook my head. "We were incredible, you and me." At 9 o'clock, Howard dropped us off at my Victorian house. Benjamin was staying the night. So was Susan. Gerald met us at the door. "Sir, the security system is armed. No one can get near this property." Howard walked us inside. "Roland, get some rest. Tomorrow we will make official statements. The police have everything they need." He handed me a folder. "I filed motions to dismiss the incompetency petition. It will be thrown out Monday. The prenup is void due to fraud. Penelope gets nothing. The transfer documents you signed also void. The company is safe." I let out a breath I did not realize I was holding. "Thank you, Howard." He shook his head. "No, thank you. You taught me what dignity under fire looks like." He left. Benjamin, Susan, and I sat alone in the living room. The silence was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Benjamin stood. "I will make tea. Real tea." He gave me a pointed look. I laughed, faint and tired. "Thank you, son." Susan sat beside me on the couch. "How is your head?" I touched the scars. "Still there. Still bald." She smiled. I think you look distinguished. I laughed bitterly. You are kind. I am honest, she said. Catherine was right to love you. My eyes filled with tears. You did not have to come tonight. Yes, I did, Susan said. That is what people who actually love you do. They show up. We sat in silence, holding hands. Benjamin returned with tea. The three of us sat together, sipping quietly. My phone, set to silent, kept lighting up on the coffee table. Notifications, voicemails, messages, I ignored all of it. Let us just sit here. For a little while. At 11 o'clock, Benjamin and Susan went to their rooms. I stood in my bedroom, looking at the framed photograph of Catherine on my nightstand. Her smile looked back at me, warm and unchanging. For 20 years I had talked to that photograph every night before bed, updating her, asking for guidance, seeking forgiveness for the mistakes I thought I had made. Tonight I did not say a word. I climbed into bed, turned off the lamp, and closed my eyes. I did not need to explain myself anymore. She already knew, and so did the rest of the world. They say time heals all wounds. I do not know if that is true. A year later, the scars on my scalp are still visible when I run my hand through my short silver hair each morning. But the weight I carried for 20 years is gone. I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Susan humming in the kitchen. 6 months ago, she became my wife in a quiet ceremony at the courthouse with Benjamin and Gerald as witnesses. No grand ballroom, no 500 guests. Just 4 people who genuinely cared about one another and vows spoken without pretense. Good morning, husband, Susan said, handing me a mug. She wore jeans and a sweater, her graying hair pulled back, and I thought she was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen besides Catherine. Benjamin called at 9. Dad, the board meeting went well. Valuation is up to $75 million. He paused. Are you ready for today? Today. The opening of the Catherine Bannerman Foundation at 847 Shoreline Drive. The 8,000-square-foot lakeside mansion that once symbolized a broken dream. Now it housed 12 bedrooms for survivors of elder abuse, a legal aid office staffed by Howard Bennett's firm Therapy Rooms, and a healing garden overlooking the water. Gerald drove us to the estate. 200 people filled the lawn. I stood at the podium looking at the house Catherine and I had walked past 30 years ago, when we were young and poor and full of hope. A year ago, I stood in front of 500 people at my daughter's wedding. I began. I showed them a video of her drugging me, shaving my head, and destroying my tuxedo while she and her fiancé laughed. Then I tore up the deed to this house and let the pieces fall like confetti. The crowd was silent. I do not regret it. This building represents something real. In the past year, 47 people have found safety here. 47 lives that mattered more than my pride or my pain. After the ceremony, a reporter asked if I had any contact with my daughter. No, I said simply. The video of your speech has 50 million views. Do you have any message for people who saw it? I thought for a moment. Elder abuse is more common than people think. Financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, physical harm. If this foundation can help even one person escape that situation, then everything I went through was worth it. I did not mention that Penelope was now 34, divorced, working at a Target 20 miles away. I learned this from Benjamin, who still tracked her movements out of protective instinct, though he refused all her attempts to contact him. Her letters arrived at my office every few weeks, forwarded unopened by my assistant. I never read them. The legal aftermath had been swift. Penelope received a 2-year suspended sentence, 500 hours of community service, and a $50,000 fine for conspiracy and assault. Bradford received probation. Caldwell Montgomery was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for securities fraud conspiracy to commit elder abuse and obstruction of justice. The Montgomery estate was auctioned off to pay creditors. I felt no satisfaction in their destruction. only a quiet, hollow relief that it was over. That evening, I visited Catherine's grave alone. I knelt and brushed away the fallen leaves. I kept my promise, I whispered. I raised them. Benjamin turned out strong, kind, everything you hoped. Penelope. My voice broke. I tried Catherine. I swear I tried. But I could not save her from herself. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment I imagined I heard Catherine's voice. You did your best. You have to let her go. I do not know if I can forgive her, I admitted. But I am learning to forgive myself. I stayed until the sun dipped below the horizon, then drove home to Susan, Benjamin, and Gerald. We gathered around the dinner table, and Benjamin raised his glass. To Dad, he said, for teaching me what real strength looks like. To Catherine, Susan added softly, for raising a son who knows how to stand up for what is right. I looked around the table at these people. My family not by blood alone, but by choice, by shared struggle, by love that had been tested and proven true. To second chances, I said. Later, after everyone had gone home, Susan and I sat on the back porch under the stars. She rested her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not installed that camera? She asked. In every day, I said. But I think the truth would have come out eventually. It always does. Stati, do you think she will ever reach out in person? I was quiet for a long time. Maybe, but I am not waiting for it anymore. I spent 20 years waiting for her to come back to me. I am done waiting. Susan squeezed my hand. You are a good man, Roland Bannerman. I thought about the bald, scarred reflection I had seen in the mirror a year ago, the destroyed tuxedo, the betrayal that had nearly broken me. Then I thought about the foundation, the survivors we had helped, the family I had built from the wreckage. I am a survivor, I corrected gently. And so are you. We sat in silence, watching the stars, grateful for the quiet, ordinary miracle of a life reclaimed. So here I am, 67 years old, scarred, but standing. And I want to speak directly to you, listening to this family story. Looking back, I see where I went wrong. I mistook silence for peace and compliance for love. I waited too long to confront the signs because I was terrified of losing what little connection I had left. Don't make my mistake. If someone you trust begins to manipulate you emotionally, financially, legally, act immediately. Document everything. Seek help. Protect yourself before loyalty becomes your downfall. God gave me strength when I had none left, and I believe He put people like Howard, Gerald, Benjamin, and Susan in my path for a reason. This family story taught me that love is not about blood alone. It's about who stands beside you when everything collapses. My dad revenge was not about cruelty. It was about justice, accountability, and breaking the cycle of abuse. Some call it harsh. I call it survival. Dad revenge is not always violent. It can be showing the world exactly who hurt you and why, then choosing to rebuild rather than destroy yourself in the process. If this family story resonates with you, please leave a comment sharing your thoughts or your own experience. Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss another dad revenge or family resilience story like this one. Your support keeps this channel alive and helps others find the courage to stand up. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I appreciate every one of you. Important note: this narrative contains fictionalized elements created for educational and reflective purposes. If the content does not suit your preferences, feel free to explore other stories on the channel that better align with your interests.